Racism doesn't really make a lot of sense when you get right down to it. The reason I say that is because, well, I think back to when I was a child, and I grew up not really thinking about what, if any, difference someone's skin color meant. It was just like having different hair color or eye color. It was just something that obviously you see and you're aware of, but it just did not seem like that big of a deal. It didn't seem like something that really mattered because obviously it was just a person, right? No matter what they looked like, it was obviously just another human being, and I didn't sense any big difference there. It was just, oh, this person looks different, but so what? That doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just like animals of the same species who have different colors of fur. Like a big herd of guinea pigs. The guinea pigs will have a variety of different colors of fur, and they'll look different. But it's really just the surface level. It's just their fur. I mean, there are some genetic differences, and that influence these things. Obviously, there are some genetic differences. That's what results in these different appearances. But just beyond that, it doesn't really, it's people just look different. It doesn't matter that much. It's all the same species. We're all the same species, and so the fact that we have different phenotypes, and we just exhibit different patterns in terms of how we look, that's all there is to it. And so the people who put a great deal of significance on skin color, I mean, I would have to ask, do they really put a similar amount of significance? Do they attach a similar amount of significance to hair color or eye color? And I'm sure there are some people out there who do, but broadly speaking, I would wager that most people don't. Most people just see it as, skin color is the thing that really matters to them. When I was a child, I was a huge fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation, the TV show. And I really liked Data, but I also really liked the characters of Worf. I think Worf or Data was probably my favorite overall. And then I also liked Geordi. And that's what I always come back to, is that as a child, watching the show, and and these different characters who look very different from each other, it didn't really strike me ever as that they were like different types of people or anything, in the sense of their appearances really mattering, if that makes sense. Obviously, I saw that they were different colors and they looked different, but that just didn't seem like that important of a distinction. It was like people with different hair colors and people with different hairstyles and facial hairstyles, and it just didn't, people who are different sizes. It just didn't ever seem like that important of a distinction. It wasn't like, oh, this is one type of person and this is another type of person, in the sense of like any real distinction. Obviously, people and objects that look different, we just obviously realize that they're different, but we don't necessarily think that it's a big deal. We don't necessarily think that there's any great significance attached to that difference. It's just a small difference. It's just an outward appearance. It's just something that I suppose it's like I don't know. Maybe that's a bad comparison. I was going to say like slightly different types of trees that look very similar, but it doesn't strike our minds as being like, oh, there's this huge difference, unless we're botanists, unless we're very interested in the subtle differences between these trees. Maybe that's a bad example though, because they are different species usually, so that may be a bad example. But I think animals of the same species, but that have different colors of fur. I think that's a good comparison because, I mean, you look at guinea pigs, and there'll be a big herd of guinea pigs, and they will, you know, there'll be brown ones, there'll be black ones, there'll be white ones, there'll be orange-red ones, rusty-colored ones, lots of different colors of guinea pigs, and then there'll be, you know, I don't know if piebald is the right word, but there'll be ones that are a mixture of different colors. And they'll have different patterns on them, and, you know, some will just be a solid color, some will have patterns on them. But the guinea pigs running around in a big herd, they don't really seem to care that much about the different colors. They don't seem to care that much about the little differences between them, you know. I don't know whether they're aware of them or not. I would imagine guinea pigs see in black and white, but I don't know that for a fact. But, you know, regardless, they just don't, it's not that big of a deal. Like, we look at them at the very least. We look at the herd of guinea pigs, and we just see guinea pigs. We just see this one species of animal, this one type of animal, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a white guinea pig, that's a black guinea pig, that's a brown guinea pig, there's a red guinea pig. But we don't, like, you know, on some level, I think we're aware that that's just their fur color. You know, we're just aware that they're like deeper than the surface. There's not that much distinguishing them from each other. You know, if they were all shaved, they'd look pretty similar, you know. They would just, yeah, they're not that different. There is no great distinction between these different animals just based on what the surface tells you. And I would say, you know, generally speaking, with human beings, it's a similar thing. I think it's kind of silly for people to assign so much significance to skin color, either positive or negative, because then, you know, there are good and bad people within every group. There are good and bad people in every race. There are good and bad people with every color of skin you can imagine. And obviously there are evolutionary reasons why people hold this position and attach such great significance to skin color. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't some differences and that people don't, that it's a totally illogical belief to hold in the sense of developing that, because, you know, different groups, like, as you grow older, and then your group sort of teaches you, like, oh, you belong to this group, and then, like, these other groups, and then you sort of, on some level, interpret that in your own way, and it reinforces all these things. But, you know, and obviously we are aware that we look different, and for some people that's a big deal. I think the behavior of a person and the character of a person, you know, whether I personally get along with them, is much more important. I think that's because I've known a lot of different people of every race, every skin color, every physical dimension, and every sort of difference you can think of. I've lived a lot of different places, and I've known a lot of different people, and I have known people I despise and people I really like in every group, and it's a mixture, you know? And so I would, like, if I was going to associate with the people of my choice, I would choose the people whose company I enjoy more, rather than just, you know, whether they look like me or not, or indeed look some other way. But I would choose the people whose company I enjoy and who I think I would get along with best. And if I were to do that, it would be, you know, if I was going to go back through my personal history and choose these people, it would just be a mixture of, like, all sorts of different kinds of people. I don't think there would be any consistent pattern in terms of what they look like. Because I've known people I absolutely hate of every description. And I've known people who I like of every description. And it's just, it just seems to be a coin toss whether I really like someone or really hate them. And it doesn't seem to. So then if I was going to limit myself to like, oh, it has to be people who look like this, I would end up associating with a lot of people who I really hate. I would end up associating with a lot of people whose company I would not enjoy, and they would probably treat me badly. And, we would fight each other, and it wouldn't be good. It would be, that would be kind of silly. It would be much better for me to gather the people from my past and my present who I think I could get along with and who I like, or at least could tolerate. And I think it would make more sense to gather them into a community and then live with them. And that community would just be a mixture of, it would just be people who I got along with and who I like, and I think I could live with long term. And it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be any particular group. There would be no consistent physical attribute, I don't think, that would really align with that. It would just be a mixture of different people. And I don't know, I think most people feel that way. Maybe not exactly in those terms, but I think most people don't care that much. But I think the problem is that we do have a natural human inclination towards feeling attacked. When we've, like, even if we don't necessarily associate with our skin color or any other physical attribute, but we feel attacked when we feel like people are going after something that, an attribute that we share. And so then we sort of can't help but feel defensive about that when, so say someone is expressing like a racist attitude towards your group. And then there's a natural kind of instinctive, natural self-defense mechanism that kicks in, and we can't help but kind of push back against that, or at least want to push back against that, and then like assert the goodness of our group. And then unfortunately that leads to people who don't place a great significance on skin color. People might find themselves, not necessarily intending to, and not through any malice on their part, but they might find themselves just feeling like they have to place a greater significance on what they look like because they have to protect themselves. And they might not be consciously thinking this, but that's like what's going on inside our minds. We feel like we have to defend ourselves, we have to protect ourselves by asserting the goodness of our characteristic, of our skin color, and then we like retaliate against other groups, and but then that causes them to do the same thing, and it's a cycle, and it might unfortunately push people more into this kind of identifying with their skin color than they otherwise might. Because I think most people don't care that much, even if they care on some level, then they, I think most of the time they don't care. They're not like, they might have prejudices, but they aren't motivated enough to act on them, or to really put any energy into it. But then if we start going after each other over our physical characteristics, then we risk causing the opposite reaction to come back onto us, and we risk people being pushed further and further into what they perceive as their group, and then assigning greater and greater significance to it, and that becoming more and more of their identity. And that's not good for anyone, because then eventually it's just going to result in, that becoming a mainstream attitude. And so the only way to, assuming people don't want that to happen, which, for most people, they shouldn't want that to happen. That's not a good outcome for the vast majority of people. They shouldn't want that to happen. And all that can really be done about that is to just, try not to make anyone else feel defensive about it by not attacking them. And then also try not to respond in kind when you feel attacked. And this applies to everyone. I'm just talking about all human beings of all skin colors, all descriptions. This is just everyone. Everyone does this. Everyone is both innocent and guilty in this situation, because it's just, this is just something all human beings do. And that's, trying to say, oh, it's this group who's bad, it's this group who's bad, like my group is wonderful and perfect. I mean, that's just, that is ignoring the fact that it's just a human issue applying to everyone. Everyone does this, not literally every individual. That's why I say everyone is innocent and guilty, because it's like, not every individual, every group of people does this. And, it's just human nature. But we have to be aware of it, and we have to try to, really think back to, when we were children, because, like I said, when I was a kid, I just don't think it seemed like a big deal. Like the kids I went to school with looked different than me often. But I don't know, we were friends, and we all just sort of played together, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal. It didn't really seem like a big deal at all. It didn't seem like it mattered at all. It was just like, oh, Trey has a different skin color than me, but so what? We were friends. It just didn't seem like it mattered at all. Like we just lived in the same place, and, we were friends, and it just didn't seem significant. And I think that to an extent, that's something that we kind of, we hear how significant it is as we grow. And so then we become more and more convinced that it is significant. We become more and more convinced that it's this huge thing that our lives have to revolve around, when in reality, it's just like the guinea pigs. It's just like, the guinea pigs don't care. They just run around with each other, and they just breed with each other and eat and run around and whistle at each other and squeak, and sometimes they fight each other over food and over who they want to mate with. But it just doesn't matter that much. Like, they don't see themselves as a bunch of different colored fur guinea pigs. They just see themselves as this big mass of guinea pigs who all just live together. And I think that's, I think more or less that's what we should be aiming for. I think we should be aiming for just seeing each other as, as different phenotypes of human beings, but not different races, not these distinct categories exactly. More just as people who look different. It's kind of like hair color. I mean, only really crazy people make hair color their identity. I think, I think only someone who's a little shallow would dislike other people. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, being proud of your hair color or anything like that, or enjoying your hair color. More just that looking down on someone else because of their hair color would be very shallow and pretty stupid, really. It wouldn't be a a productive way to live, because ultimately, who cares? It's just hair color. It's just this external skin deep thing that doesn't really matter. And it would be a lot easier for all of us, I think, if we stopped assigning so much significance to skin color and other physical characteristics like that. I think it would make it a lot easier for us to figure out what we share in common, and our shared beliefs and our shared values, and what we treasure. And then we could figure out who we want to live with, and who we want to spend time with, and who we want to associate with, without putting this additional filter on it, this additional layer saying, oh, well, it has to be, people have to look like this, people have to look like that. Because that just complicates it. And then that just makes our lives more difficult, because then, well, if we lived like that, we'd end up associating with all sorts of terrible people who make our lives miserable. and we don't want to associate with. It's better to just find the good people who we enjoy being with and unify with them and live with them.